Welcome to today's devotional. We have been walking through Luke chapter 6, asking God to speak to us and to form us into God's family that unites people from all tribes and nations and brings us together in a level place in an equal and just and good and loving society. And so in the midst of whatever forces are trying to pull you apart and divide you and cause animosity and fights and struggles, may you find God's love speaking to you today. And as you enter into this time of devotion, if you would just spend some time in prayer asking God to speak to you in the reading of God's Word and in this devotion time.
It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul.
Our devotion text comes from Luke chapter 6, verses 41 and 42, and we're going to spend the next 2 days in these two verses, and today we're going to focus on the first one. But hear this word of context of Jesus showing up to say these words to the crowds and also showing up today to say these words to you. Jesus came down with them and stood on a level place with a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea, Jerusalem, and the coast of Tyre and Sidon. And Jesus looked up at his disciples and said, "Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, 'Friend, let me take out the speck in your eye,' when you yourself do not see the log in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye." The word of the Lord. As we walk through these verses today and tomorrow, we're going to start with the first question that Jesus asks in this text. He starts with a why question, and tomorrow we'll get the how. And he starts with asking, why do you see this but not that? And he says, why do you see the little speck, the small thing in the eye of your neighbor, and yet you miss the big thing, the log in your own eye? And I think this image has stood out to so many people because of how kind of over the top and obvious the image is of, if you could imagine someone walking around and they got a little bit of dust in their eye or something, and then you walking around with a giant log out of your eye. Obviously that log imagery really sticks out for people. But yet we do not notice our own challenges, our own flaws. Sometimes we miss some of the things that are wrong of our own way of seeing the world, and we notice very quickly when people that we see in our everyday life, when their vision of the world looks different or off to us. And so I was thinking about this text, and I was thinking about photography because I love taking photos and trying to figure out how to frame an image and how to capture the beauty, how to capture a story with photography. And I was thinking about in photography, there's so many factors that you are trying to capture and trying to make decisions on of do you want motion in the shot? So how fast is the shutter going? You know, is the white balance set correct so that the color looks correct through the lens? Is your image bright enough or dark enough? Or what kind of mood do you want based on the brightness and the darkness? And what's in focus and what's not in focus, and how thin of a focus do you want? And so I was thinking about that of you've got all these technical questions, and then you have the subject that you want to take a photo of, and let's say I was trying to take a portrait, and I was out and we were outside, and maybe the wind's blowing, and I noticed that your hair is just kind of got a flyaway, and it's something that photographers look for or notice because sometimes after the fact in editing, you got to kind of clear up some of the hair that's kind of out of place. And so maybe you notice that one tiny little hair that's off. But what you forgot about was that you had dust on your camera sensor. or on the lens of the camera. And so every single picture, no matter whether that person's in the shot or not, no matter whether their hair is in the right place or not, every single picture has got a blurry spot on it. And maybe the photo is just in a certain way that you don't notice the blurry spot. But you are so thinking about every other thing that the thing closest to you, the thing that is kind of central in the first step of this photo process, that your sensor, that your lens is clean and able to see the world. If you mess that up, you are affecting every single image that you take. And so for so many of us, we go about our life and we notice the little flaws, the things that don't look as perfect in the world around us. But sometimes we don't take the time and the energy to look inward and look and see what in me is a little bit off that's going to make everything that I see be slightly off. And so Jesus invites us to ask and to reflect on, why do I let my vision go uncorrected? Why do I let it go unnoticed when I'm looking at everybody else's way of seeing the world? And he invites us to think about how we see the world. And so I have some questions that I want to invite you to reflect on today as you think about, why do I always notice everyone else's flaws and maybe I don't see the things I need to work on in myself? So the first question, how often do you find yourself criticizing someone else or someone else's way of doing things or someone else's way of seeing things? How often is that a part of your kind of internal thought process? How often is that a part of things that you say out loud, that you're criticizing people out loud? How often is that a part of you typing on a keyboard or on your phone, on social media? How much of your day is spent critiquing and criticizing somebody else today? Secondly, what flaws do you have that are going unnoticed today? Many of us know our own challenges. We've seen our own logs. We've seen those things that are problems in our lives. Maybe you're working on it. But sometimes there's some major problems. There's some major logs in our eyes that we have not yet named, that we haven't yet noticed. And so I want to invite you to pray and think through your day, think through your life, think through your thoughts, your actions, and invite God to illuminate what might be a problem, might be a challenge, what might be a flaw that you have yet to go to God and ask for healing, for transformation, for growth, for a new day where that log might be removed from your eye. And lastly, I just want to invite you to kind of do an exercise in this. If you're thinking about how often are you criticizing others, what's going unnoticed in your life, maybe what you might do for one day is just take a writing pad, or maybe you've got a cell phone with memos, and every time you find yourself critiquing somebody else and the way that they see the world, the way that they are doing something, just give yourself a check, give yourself a little mark to count. And at the end of the day, see how many times you've criticized someone else in the way they see the world, the way they think, the way they are engaged in the world. And then spend enough time in prayer that you could start reflecting on that many things of yourself. What are the things you need to correct? What are the things you need to pray about? And see if the scales are tilted of, maybe I criticize others way too much. And what is it to spend one day's worth of critiques of others trying to pray about my own flaws, my own challenges, so that at least it's a balanced scale. And tomorrow we're going to talk more from Jesus' words here about how to kind of go forth and practice and how to engage people in the world where we know we all have things we need to change. We all have things we need to correct. But let's start by looking at the way we see the world. Why do we see the log in our neighbor's eyes and not the speck in our own? So I want to invite you to hear the words of Jesus today. Because Jesus came down with them and stood on a level place with a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea, Jerusalem, and the coast of Tyre and Sidon. And Jesus looked up at his disciples and said, "Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but you don't notice the log in your eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, "Friend, let me take out that speck in your eye," when you yourself do not see the log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. The word of the Lord. May you find God's vision for your life, and may your eyes be renewed and restored to see with God's eyes the world around you today.
It is well with my